So remember when I told you about the messed up hair, which represents the old crazy guy, which represents the wisdom, like Albert Einstein, for example? You see, John is the crazy one with the messed up hair, the old wise man who dresses funny.
He is, according to Luke's gospel, a relation of Jesus, perhaps his cousin. He's a few months older than Jesus, and he comes out of the wilderness, we're told. He's dressed wildly in camel's hair and a leather belt around his waist.
You see, he's just like the other John who wrote Revelation. He is the old crazy guy, the wise one. Now remember that I told you the very word John, or Johanna, means Jack. He is the crazy one. This is why Johnny Depp plays the character of the Jack, the jester, the funny-dressed, crazy-haired, crazy guy. So now you'll understand why Jack Nicholson plays the jester, crazy Jack, Johnny in The Shining.
Here's Johnny!
So the Johns of the Bible are actually the Jacks of the Bible. So you see, John was the last or the 12th apostle to die, and his brother James was the first brother to die. So again, we have the two brothers on either end, the beginning and the end. So St. John is the one who is the 12th or the end or the last to die, which is why St. John of Patmos writes the book of Revelation, which is about the end of the world. Which is why we have the story of the beheading of John the Baptist, or John of Patmos. Now notice how John sees Jesus the Son between the two pillars. And we see the same symbolism of Jesus depicted in his sacrifice. And of course, we saw the twin pillar symbolism in the World Trade Center of 9/11, and in movies like Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, as well as stories like Hercules and The Two Pillars. And this is why we find the three pillars in the church, as well as secret societies like the Freemasons. And of course in cults like the OTO. And of course the pillars are on fire. And you'll notice there's actually 3 pillars. And during 9/11 or 7/11, the World Trade Center twin pillars or twin towers were also on fire. And of course, the third pillar to be brought down that day was Building 7. Now remember that September 11th is not 9/11, but 7/11. Building 7 and the two towers of the one and the one, 7/11. So you see, the flag of Israel is actually showing you the exact same symbolism. You see, the flag is representative of 7/11, the two pillars with the 7 in the middle. So like I said, the Star of David, or the Star of Divide, the hexagram, represents not only the 6 but the 7, which lies in the mid L, and the 7th spot represents the sun. This is why they place Jesus in the middle of the Star of David, because he is the 7 or the sun. And you will also find the same symbol with pagan sun worshippers. You'll see the symbol of the hexagram, the symbol of the sun. So like I said before, this is exactly why Sunday, the day of the sun, is the seventh day. So the Star of David reveals the numbers of 6 as well as the 7, and 12 as well as the 13, which is why Jesus is known as 7 and 13. The houses of the zodiac are 12, and the center or the mid-L is the sun, which is 13. So we find the 7 in the 7 gates of hell, or the 7 deadly sins, and the 7 sacraments or sacrifices, for example. And, like I said before, they circle around the Kaaba 7 times. And you see, this is exactly why the May sons, or the sons of the May, the fertility of May Day, they use the symbol of the sexagram with the G in the mid-L, because the G is the number 7. So we find the sacred number 7 in the colors of the rainbow. And also we find the sacred 7 in water, the neutral 0, which is pH of 7. And then there is the serpent energy of the Kundalini, or the 7 chakras, or the 7 light emanations of the body. And then we have the logo of 7 Up, with its symbol of the red sun, and the 7 referring to the 7 planets. And of course, the symbolism of 7-Eleven, and how it makes us think of Arabs' September 11th. And then we have the Arabic 7x7 color pyramid. And then we have the sacred pyramid, or the pyramid of fire, the triangle or the triang of El. And the pyramids were dedicated to the sacred sun god Ra or Re, also known as Horus, and various other names, but the Egyptians or the ancient Kemetans always dedicated the pyramids to the sacred sun. And to the Egyptians, the sacred sun was on fire, thus the pyramid of fire, or the flame. And this is exactly why the pyramid shape has the shape of the triangle, which is that of the rays that emanate from the sun. So the pyramid is the symbol of the light rays of the sun that are beaming down. And when you look at the sun rays that come through the clouds, for example, you'll notice that they form a pyramid. And of course, as above, so below. And you'll notice the pyramids that meet above and below the sun, which is reflected in the pyramids of the Louvre. So to the Egyptians, the pyramid light rays were a way to ascend and descend to God's sun. But they knew the very essence of the sun itself represented the round, circular circle, which is why the Egyptians always symbolized the sun with the solar disk. So this is why they depicted the sun god Ra, or Horus, with the round solar disk atop of his head. Now notice the serpent or the cobra that encircles the sun. The Wajet is an ancient symbol of the serpent cobra goddess, which is another indication of the ancient serpent and the relationship to the goddess. And the Wajet combined with the Uraeus is the symbol of the cobra and the solar disk. The Uraeus represents the rearing cobra, or the Ka-ba-ra, that spits fire. And the pharaohs believed that the cobra would spit fire on their enemies. And this is exactly why the pharaohs dress and wear the headdress of the cobra. So the Kab Ra that spits fire, the cobra, represented Ra, the sun that was on fire. In fact, this is why the very color of red begins with the sun god Re or Ra. So the pyramids represented the pharaoh and were known as the great house of God or the great house of nature. They were used to project and emanate the spirit and the soul of the pharaoh in the afterlife. They would pinpoint the energy to the apex, which was the sun. And this is why they tell us that our inner spirit is our soul, because the soul is the sun. And this is exactly why today we still erect our pyramids or our tombstones, so that they will project and emanate our souls to the afterlife. So you see, this is why the very word of Pharaoh, or the great house, has the very essence of the fire of Ra. And this is exactly why the red pyramids have the word Ra in them, the Pi Ra Mid. And of course, when you're exposed to the red hot fire of the sun, you will get sun burn and turn red. And you will notice that almost all deserts of the world that bake in the heat of the rays of the sun always will appear to be red. So I'm not saying that the deserts of Cairo or where Egypt is, that they are red, but they do carry the symbolism and the appearance of red. In fact, one of the pyramids in Egypt is known as the Red Pyramid, named because of the rusty reddish hue of its stones. Now, as fate would have it, would you believe that my son, even though he had no idea that I was working on this portion of the Red Pyramid, he pulls out of his backpack a book called The Red Pyramid. So the F, or the PH, is the fire or the pyre, the flame. Like the firelight of the photon, which is a particle wave of light. And by the way, Heliopolis means the city of the sun. Then we have the city or the temple of Luxor. And the temple means the fire of El, like the temperature, which is the heat or the fire. Exactly like the Temp El Mount. So we have the Ra, or the Horus of the two horizons. You see, the temple of Luxor, we find that Lux means the light, or the fire. So now you will understand why the Luxor in Las Vegas beams and shoots the light into the universe from the apex. Just like the light or the lux of Lucifer. So like I said, the triangle represents fire. And this is exactly why the triangle is the mountain. And mountain means fire, as in Beltane, the Tane, the Ai, which is the mountain of fire, like Mount Sinai, because it is made from the volcano of fire. And the phoenix is the fire bird. Now the Sphinx also represents the fire of the sun, which I will explain in another video. And the Phoenicians, they were known for the color purple or red. And of course we see the connection with the bull or the cow and the fire. And then we have the Phrygian red cap, related to Mithraism, which of course she slays the bull. And even today we have the Shriners or the Freemasons who wear the red cap of death. So like I said, I will be making a video about the pyramids because it's too much information to include here about all of the symbolism that is included in ancient Kemet or Egypt. But I will say that the pyramids were known to be made from the 7 levels. So again, we see how the number 7 relates to the 7th day, or Sunday, which is the sun. And the Egyptian measuring device was known as the royal cubit, which of course was 7 palms. And the Sphinx was known to be a monument to the 7 glorious ones. And the Egyptians said that 7 Hathors would appear when a child was born. So the Egyptians saw that the sun would be born, die, and then be reborn again, which is why the symbolism of the sun and the serpent go hand in hand, exactly like the Ouroboros, a revolving cycle. Thus the serpent, or the cobra, the fiery eye of Ra. The serpent would shed its skin and be reborn again. And also it came from the underworld. It came from the caves or the holes of the earth, which was the dominion of the underworld. And now you know why you find religious cults that hold the serpents. And what I find most interesting is that when the cobra serpent snake rears up, it forms the number 7. And of course, the very essence of the letter S resembles the serpent or the snake. And of course, the serpent makes the S sound, as well as beginning the very word of 7. So we see the serpent S in words like snake, serpent, sun, and of course 7. And again, with the ancient Mayan culture, we also find the connection of the serpent and the sun god. And of course, they built pyramids. And these pyramids were dedicated to both the sun god and the moon god. So you see, this is the avenue of the dead, which is the pyramid of the sun and the moon. So they worshipped the serpent, the snake, or the dragon, and of course they tell us about the 7 Mayan prophecies, which of course, again, the 7 is related to the sun. So you see, this is why Mel Gibson made the film called The Apocalypto. And of course, you know apocalypto really means the apocalypse. And the apocalypto, or the apocalypse, is nothing more than the Apollo eclipse, which is the sun eclipse, the sun and the moon. The solar Luna eclipse. You see, the word eclipse comes from the word kuklos. So now you will understand why the serpent of the sun is called Kukulkan. And why do you think Kukulkan is called the plumed serpent or the feathered serpent? Because the serpent of the sun eclipse, or the kuklos, shows the plumage of the feathering. Exactly like a peacock, for example, that plumes and shows off his feathers, which is exactly why the ancient Mayans and the Aztecs wore the plumage of the plumed feathers. And this is exactly why they wore the plumed feathers on top of their head, which is their crown. And this is exactly where the word crown comes from, which is from Coronis. And of course, it is the corona of the sun. So this is exactly why they show the image and depict Kukulkan as the plumed serpent with the corona, or the crown, upon his head. So now that you understand more about the sun corona and the feathered plumed serpent that is pluming its feathers out, you'll understand why the cobra stands up and plumes out, because the cobra is Ra, or the corona of the sun, the serpent. And of course, you see the Son of God, Jesus or Yahshua or Jesus. You'll notice he's always depicted, like I said before, with the crown or the cronus around his head, because he is the plumed, feathered God of the sun. And this is exactly why they depict Jesus as the son that wears the crown of thorns upon his head. And of course the debate goes on. Is Jesus black or is he white? Because the truth is he represents the Dios, the two, both the sun and the moon. And when you look at the eclipse, you will notice both the black and the white. And of course, the ancient civilizations of the Mayans and the Aztecs always made the blood human sacrifices to the sun and moon gods. And like I said, the whole story of the Bible is about the moon and the sun. And of course, it's about the serpent. And of course, the story revolves around the human blood sacrifice of Jesus. So like I said, that's exactly why they tell us that Jesus is our salvation, because the truth is, the sun is actually giving up its life or its energy so that we may live. And that's exactly why they tell us that the Son of God will save our soul. So you see, this is why the L lights or the E lights, the illuminated ones of the eclipse of the light, show the symbol of our ignorance, which is the symbol of the triangle or the eclipse of the sun. So yes, the sons of the May or the May sons are exactly like the ancient Mayans. So you see, since ancient times, the elite or the rulers, the kings and queens of the world, have always used the ignorance of the sheep against themselves. And this is exactly why the ancients used to use the sun and the moon and the eclipse to make them think that they had power over the sun. They would tell the people that they could black out the sun if they did not obey them. So perhaps now you will understand why Mel Gibson in his film The Apocalypto shows you the eclipse of the sun and the moon. So you see, the truth is that Sunday is the end of the week's end. This is exactly why it's the end of a cycle, a sun cycle or recycle. So you see, this is exactly why they tell us that the end of the world or the end of the Mayan calendar falls on a Sunday, the day of the sun. So don't have apocalyptophobia and think that the end of the world is coming at the end of 2012, because it has absolutely nothing to do with 12. It has to do with the 13, because 2012 on the winter solstice is the eve of the new year, when the 12 changes to the 13. This is nothing but Illuminati symbolism, and that's exactly why they want us to be afraid and fear the number 13. So you see, it's symbolic of time, like when our clocks go from the 12 to the 1, which is the 13, or the 12 houses of the zodiac, and the sun in the middle is 13. So you see, our clock actually represents the planets. The sun is the hour or the Horus, and the moon is the min or the minute hand, and the second hand is the sex hand of 60 seconds, which is Mercury or Hermes, the fertility god. So anyway, now you know why there were 13 original colonies, because it's symbolic of the 13, which represents both the sun and the moon. And that's exactly why Jesus is the 13 who has the 12 helpers. So like I said, Jesus, the Son, represents both the 7 and the 13.